independent creators deal with when you're dealing with the big guys, because
Right.
you can't afford the lawyers to
Right.
actually go after them. You have to take
Right.
your time. When your time should be spent on the board, you have to go out of your way and figure out all this legal stuff to keep them in check, because they
Right.
got endless amounts of money to basically basically steamroll anyone, and really a lot
Right.
of
That's what
intellectual
they do.
property is that, and
Look at
that's
Shazam and Superman. I learned that when Shazam, that lawsuit was many years, and then DC won the lawsuit. But then after Fawcett Comics folded a few years later, like during that whole
yeah,
comic book burning
yeah.
time,
The
like the
word
McCarthyism and stuff, DC started publishing Shazam without permission
right,
for a year. So they basically stole Shazam and
right.
was using all their characters and didn't purchase it until actually more than a year. It was like they didn't buy him legitimately until the 70s.
Yeah, and I think if I remember correctly, Fawcett had sold the term Captain Marvel to Marvel
Right,
to try to raise
exactly.
the money to continue fighting against DC.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
there's a long history of sleaze, and
Yeah,
what's really interesting too is, and so in terms of Punchline, I'm very happy to hear that you're going to go after them. In terms of the term superhero, just to go back to our first interview that we had that made it to the Guardian and made it to the Daily News.
right.
Um, what happened with that? How did that basically finish in terms of the superhero?
Well, DC and Marvel jointly own a trademark, which is one, illegal, but they allow it because they're billionaires.
Right,
Two, so you can't jointly own a trademark. Number
right,
one. Number two, they insisted and claimed that they created the word superhero, that they invented the word.
right. Super rich multinational rips you off. What do you do? And I
Right.
always
Go
think
to
that
war
really
with
is
them. That's us.
right. You're kind of like a superhero. You're actually taking them on, and you're doing it yourself. You
Right.
don't have a lawyer that's doing it for you, and I think that's incredible. So yes, the word superhero. I remember you telling me that you had found a book from, I think, 1913 or something.
Yeah, it was the Airman's Outing. It was Contact the Airman's Outing. I believe it was 1913 or 1918.
Hmm.
That was the book that actually used the term superheroes first, about describing the Red Baron,
Right.
and the term was superheroes of war. And then there was another thing that was from 1903, because they had mentioned Superman, and I said, well, man,
Yeah.
man versus Superman or some shit like that, or man.
And you could go
It was 1903,
right,
so
and
it's
you could
like
go to Nietzsche. Nietzsche said the Uberman.
Nietzsche, yeah, yeah,
You know.
exactly. And Nietzsche, I had cited Nietzsche, and then shortly after that, what's funny is that I cited Nietzsche. I said, the family of Nietzsche could come after you and sue you guys because you're basically, Uberman is theirs.
Right.
And you know what they did? They did a Superman comic immediately after the lawsuit. It was a one-shot issue that Jim Lee drew as Superman as a Nazi, in this Nazi world fighting the freedom fighters, and that actually ended up being on the Supergirl show.
Oh, that's
They,
insane too, because I know that having studied some Nietzsche, not he's a very controversial figure, but
Mhm.
that he would have hated all that Nazi stuff, which is
Yeah,
very
yeah, yeah.
very interesting.
And they
Uh,
called him the Uberman. Yeah, it's like,
oh wow, wow, that
you know,
that is a student of like having studied philosophy that just grates me on so many levels. Uh,
yeah. And then also at the time, I was doing Bronx Hero Soda with a company called Bronx Pop, and I was like, hey, if I wanted to do superheroes as an energy drink, I could do that, and there's nothing you could do about it
right,
because it's the literal element. And then
right.
you know what they did after our lawsuit? In Previews magazine, they had released energy drinks of Superman's logo, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, The Flash.
Wow. And
Now they're not still in the market. They just did it because they bought the trademark for it.
right.
They put it
And
on the market. So everything that I told them I basically pointed out their holes and showed them in court over 278 products that were DC licensed figures that did not use the word superhero in my argument, because even though they had the trademark, they weren't using it. They were licensing it out to other companies. They would use it. But DC themselves did not use the term superhero on any of their books. You don't see the word superhero on Superman or Batman and Marvel is the one that started using superhero in the title of Spider-Man, above the Amazing Spider-Man. They said New York's first superhero, some crap like that, or friendliest superhero. And then Fantastic Four used to have, some sensational superhero thing like back in the day. They started using that again for a while, And
what's interesting is that the reason that they co-own it, from what my understanding is because of the old toy company Mego.
Yeah, because of Mego, yeah. And also the Cooper costumes as well.
Yeah, and they didn't want Mego to own the trademark for superhero for the toy line, so they very much broke the law. They're not supposed to co-own it. That's like if PC, not PC. Let's say PC was owned by. The term PC was owned by Dell and Apple.
Right.
That would be completely, you're rigging the market. And most people, I don't think, like to think of it, but the market is rigged in comics. It's very much
of course,
rigged.
Completely. It's a complete monopoly.
Complete.
Right down to distribution,
Yeah.
Which has its roots and origins in the mafia,
Yeah. There's a book, The World of Tomorrow, or Tomorrow. It's a great book. I'll actually put the link and actually have the correct name for it, which is a whole book about the mafia and all the stuff that went on back in the 50s and 60s with that and the sort of rackets they had going. So how did you settle?
And everything.
How did it end in terms of?
So after I was able to present that, DC Marvel lawyers were basically saying, they waited like 6 or 7 months to see if I would crack, and I was like, look, I'm willing to work with you. If you want me to give the trademark up, I still need the protections of a trademark from your companies. I need your word in writing if you want me to give this up. Now, I knew that I couldn't keep it going because at a certain point I would need a lawyer, because they were going to keep pushing it. The judge was clearly on their side because he was like a geek, It's like he said, "Well, they invented the word," and I was like, "No, they didn't." And even when I proved it, then the judge didn't want to talk to me after I proved him wrong. I guess I insulted him, So I knew it wasn't gonna. It was gonna go down in their favor. So I was just like, I proved that you guys didn't create it. So and they were willing to settle, and they said, "Well, what do you want?" And I said, well, you could either give me a contract with the rights to use the word superhero, or you could pay me $100,000 and I will never use it again, And they were like, well, we're not paying you $100,000. They said, why $100,000? It's because I've been working on this title since 1993. I've been publishing it since 2000. It's a registered business. Cup of Java Studio is a registered business. I pay taxes on it. And I said at that time, I had invested over $100,000 in the title A World Without Superheroes, in publishing and expenses and conventions, travel, So they were like, no, DC came back with an offer for $5,000. I was like, I just laughed. I was like, screw you guys. I'm not going to give it up then, So then they were like, okay, we're willing to, they waited a few more months. Then they were like, oh, we're willing to give you the contract that gives you permission to use the word, and then carries the same weight and protection of a trademark, but it's through them. And then there are some clauses in there, and I agreed to the clauses. And I said, well, if you guys violate your own contract, because just think about the Indians and the Americans, these treaties, right? Yep. They break it all the time. So I was like, well, there has to be a penalty for you for using the word. He said, well, we have to pay a penalty? We have to pay you? I said, yeah.
Yeah, well, you break a contract, there's penalties.
Right.
Obviously.
And then plus there were penalties in the contract. If I had created other titles with the word superhero in it, then I would be penalized from them, and they would, or if I try to re-trademark the World Without Superheroes after the agreement,
right.
They were like, this contract is null and void if you try to re-trademark this, you know? So they had
Wow.
penalties. I was like, well, I need a penalty too. So they agreed on a percentage of what they would pay if they stole the term.
Now, going back now to your side note, which is now going to be our main note, which is you're
Right.
talking about, because I imagine a lot of people out there who are watching this are probably wondering, well, how did DC and or Marvel manage to rip off your designs? How are they able to do this? So I would like to first talk about that. You and I were talking. We were IMing each other, and you were filling me in on much of what happened to you.
Right.
And let's just begin at the very beginning, going way back to your youth when you were 14.
Right.
Now, tell the audience, tell all of us what happened to you when you were 14.
When I was 14 years old was about the time when they killed Jason Todd in the comic books. And I decided to draw. I was already writing and drawing my own scripts for DC as a fan. You know, I wrote my own stories, like, you know, like fan fiction, right?
Right.
So I had written and fully drawn a 24-page comic of the return of Jason Todd, how he would come back. He had a red helmet. He looked
Right.
You know, he had a red racing suit type of thing. He had a suit that could fly, you know, and then Batman was Dick Grayson in the year 2013.
Right.
In the future of the 2013, they had a flying black jet that can go into space. You know, like they were basically like astronaut type. You know, they're beyond just fighting in Gotham, you know?
Right. And at this time, you were being taught by someone. And then we're not going to actually mention that person's name because you've told me you're not going to mention that person's name. But you were actually taking a class on comic book.
Well, yeah, years after. Well, for that submission, I had submitted that to DC Comics back in the day when I was 14. And then I was working at a comic book store at 15. But years later, in 93, so that was in 88. And then in 93, I took this class from this editor at School of Visual Arts. It was one of the first classes I took at the School of Visual Arts. And because I was a fan of his work and I've always followed it and read it, I decided to take that class.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then during those class sessions, there was like a Q&A that he kind of did. I mean, he really didn't teach, to be honest. He used to just talk about what he did in the day, what movie he went to talk about. Like he used to talk about seeing Charlie Chang and talk about Charlie Chang all the time, these old black and white movies.
Right.
And talk about, and you know, and he used to just, so he would just ask things like, oh, what would you do? How would you, he asked the class, how would you bring back Bucky, Gwen Stacy, Jason Todd? And I know they mentioned Uncle Ben, but nobody was interested in that. But it's like,
right.
But we talked about comic book characters that have died that never returned. And then people mentioned a bunch. And then we talked about it. And then I had mentioned the return of Jason Todd because I was like really harping on the death of Jason Todd. I was really upset about, you know, him when he died, you know.
So in some way, it seems to me that he was fishing.
Of course he was fishing, yeah.
And
I mentioned the story I wrote at age 14. I mentioned him the story I wrote at age 18 about him being a clone and coming back and all this other stuff, you know.
Right. So pretty much from the very beginning, from when your first contact with the industry, you're pretty much getting, I guess you could say, basically used, harvested.
Harvested. Yeah, that's a good word. Yeah.
Harvested. You know.
I mean, there was another situation after that class was done. I mean, you know me, I tell the truth. I just tell it like it is.
Yeah.
And
I know.
there was a point where he was not teaching so much because I think it was like a 2.5-hour class or something like that. And then he'd use like the last 20 minutes to read off some notes he had in a notebook, like spieling out. And then everyone would be writing down. So I wrote that down like to the T, like to the letter.
Right.
But I had told him one time, like I was kind of annoyed. It was a summer class. And I was just like, you know, it was either summer or spring. And I remember telling him, you know, I spent $650 or whatever it was for that class. It was a night class. I was coming after work.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I believe it was like either 2 hours or 3-hour class. And I was just like, I really would appreciate it if you actually just taught us how to write. That's what I would. And then all the people were like, oh, how could you say that to him? He's the
Right.
famous whatever. Like everyone was up his ass.
Right.
And then he was just like, I said, I don't mean any disrespect, but I actually paid a lot of money. I had saved a lot of money, worked double shifts to take this class. And you're talking about you and your wife and what you're doing. And I didn't pay for that. I said, maybe these other people who have rich families and shit can do that. But I live in the Bronx and I don't have money like that. So I really want to learn how to write comics.
Right.
And
So,
then shortly after that, he ended up giving me a D in the class.
oh, but did he also, from my understanding, from what we talked through the IM, he also took in a lot of ideas from the class too, as
He
well.
did tons of
So,
ideas.
like,
Yeah.
as well as art and writing and everything else
Yep. Yep.
to do with that. Wow.
Yeah, because we had to. It was a writing class, so our assignments are basically writing scripts.
So,
Writing exercises, writing scripts.
and also from my understanding was,
You had to have like one major comic book completed at the end of the class.
wow, and he got to keep a copy of it, I imagine.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yes, I'm
Yeah.
sure he did.
So, and then later on, and so we keep this in sequence, you started to see some of the things that you had submitted to this person creep
Yeah,
up
but
into different aspects.
as a student, I didn't submit him that Batman story. It was years later in the comic convention. We did
Okay.
talk about verbally, but at the comic convention in 2005 is when I submitted that stuff to him.
Wow.
At the Baltimore Con. We had sat together for a weekend at New York Comic Con, and then we met. He wanted me to mail stuff to him, so he gave me his address, and I was like, "No, I'm going to actually be in Baltimore. Is that the next show you're at?" He said, "Yeah," and I said, "So I'll meet you there." And I didn't have a table there, but I was going to be there because I have family in Baltimore, and I used to live in Baltimore.
Okay.
And that's when I gave him the submission of everything, like this plethora of characters, story synopsises, and all this stuff.
And then you started to later on see it sort of creep into different aspects.
So as much,
of,
right,
it
exactly.
was always the Batman too.
It was always the Batman, yeah.
And he was just, I don't know if you mind me mentioning this, but he was the actual editor, one of the editors.
Yes, he was. He was the editor of Batman. Yeah.
Wow. So this isn't just something that, sort of like they just went to a con, they saw some of your work for the, A World Without Superheroes. This has been going on with you
for a long time, for a long time.
For a long time.
Yeah,
Wow.
They were harvesting ideas from everybody in that class the entire time that were there. And I was just like, this is like a conversation you have in a comic book store, not in a classroom, like these,
right.
You know what I mean? Like they sit there.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And a 14-year-old wouldn't have the distrust. Like, the distrust comes with a lot of age.
Yeah. When I was in the college class, I think I was probably about 19 in the college class, but I was 14 when I submitted this stuff to DC beforehand.
Wow. Yeah, and I'm gonna just let everybody know, everyone know, I'm going to have a whole blog post with all of Ray's images that he's given to me. I'll try to organize it as best as I can for you to go through, see all the stuff that he's mentioning. There's the Black Power one's so egregious. Just the colors and the forearm guards and everything else. It's
right. It's just
so
the same
over
shit.
the top. And then there's the other issue because we're talking about that person. That's one person, but you had a whole other different issue with the guy that used to be your roommate who worked for Marvel. Literally, his whole job was just coming up with ideas. And I think you had mentioned to me in our IM conversation that it was $15,000 he would get for each design.
Yeah, for his concepts. Yeah.
Yeah, which gives a lot of incentive for someone to start ripping people off.
Right, exactly. And he used to be in our group, Right. He used to be in our group and stuff, and he was a ghost artist for Marvel. And we caught him during the group. I mean, not just one of the ideas was giving Hulk tattoos, and then I saw that. I said, "Hey, man, what's this?" He was like, "Hey, I have nothing to do with it." Like his face of guilt was just busted him.
Wow. And
then maybe like 6 or 7 months later, that was House of M Hulk when they had him painted with some stuff.
Right.
And then shortly after that, after House of M, I guess in 2007, they had the Red Hulk. And that was something I was actually working on. And he was my roommate. He lived with me. And I was trying to tell him, hey, why don't we present this to Marvel? You have connections and editors and stuff. Why don't we present the Red Hulk? And he was like, oh, it's a dumb idea. They're not going to buy it.
Oh my God, yeah.
And I was like, no, the Red Hulk is a great idea. What are you talking about? When you get mad, you turn red. You don't turn green. I said, when you're envious, you turn green, not when you get angry.
Right.
You know, we talked about the whole Frankenstein origin, why he was green and then gray. And, you know, I was like, you know, the Hulk should be like, you know, like
Red.
Dragon Ball. Like he should have different levels of power, you know, and his highest power should be when he's red. You know, and then I ended up using those. I mean, he stole it. I was so pissed about it. I should have. That's before Marvel and DC came after me. So this is like 3 years before. So
Right.
I just felt defeated as a fan because I at this moment still wanted to work for Marvel. This guy who lived with me, I mean, he stopped living with me at that time when that happened.
Right.
You know, we were no longer living together. But then I took him back in years later, and he lived with me for another 5 years. And my wife used to say, oh, you're like boyfriend and girlfriend, you know, like, you know, because
Right.
we always loved talking about comics. You know, we were very close friends, but he hit me over, and I got pissed about it.
Right.
It took me 3 years to get over the whole Red Hulk thing, and then I brought him back into my home when his parents died, and I took him in, and then he basically started screwing me again. So it's like,
Wow.
and he left. So
yeah, which is
some people, you know, a leopard doesn't change their spots. You know, when they're desperate for money, they're gonna steal what they can.
and that's you know the incentive of $15,000. I mean, you're
every time you create a character or steal something,
you know that's you're turned into a bit of a merc, because if you don't have that creative well to just come up with stuff on your own.
And he's not very creative. He's been working on the same story since I met him.
Wow.
You know. You know.
So the other thing is too, this brings for all the creative people who are listening to this, because this is very important for creative people, because right now I'm sure there's some people who are mega fans of the big two.
Yeah.
Some of us who've been doing this a little more cynical about it.
Right.
Be very careful when you go to
you gotta be careful,
because
and watch
these
out
people
for a
are
dude
actually
named Mike
planted in
Klein.
there. What's that?
I said I'd be careful for a dude named Mike Klein that works for Marvel as a ghost artist. You know.